The boy sat with his back pressed against the splintered post, his wrists tied behind him so tight the rope had worn through skin. His boots, cracked leather, too big for his feet, were still laced. He hadn't taken them off in 3 days. "Don't," he whispered when the man with the grey hat bent down near him. "Don't touch them." The man paused. His hand hovered near the boy's ankle, then pulled back. "I can sleep in my boots," the boy said again, his voice thin and shaking. I have to." It wasn't defiance. It was something else. Something that made the crowd of men standing around the auction pen look away, uncomfortable, like they'd seen something they weren't supposed to. The auctioneer, a squat man with a sunburned face and a voice like gravel, waved a hand dismissively. "Next lot, boy maybe 12 or 13, no papers, found him outside Fort Davis 3 weeks back, been through 4 camps already, won't work, won't talk much, but he's strong enough if you break him right." A few men laughed, others didn't. The boy's eyes stayed down, locked on his boots. They were the kind a man would wear, not a child. The leather was split along the toe, the heel worn uneven, dust clung to the laces. His legs were tucked tight to his chest, like he was trying to make himself smaller. Gideon Cole stood at the back of the crowd, his hat pulled low, his jaw set. He wasn't here to buy. He'd come into town to sell 3 horses and pick up salt and nails. But he'd heard the commotion near the old rail yard and made the mistake of walking closer. Now he couldn't leave. The boy's face was smudged with dirt, his hair matted and too long. His shirt hung loose, torn at the shoulder, but it was the boots that held Gideon's attention. The way the boy clutched his knees, the way his breath came fast and shallow every time someone stepped too close. "I can sleep in my boots," the boy said again, quieter this time, to no one, to everyone. Gideon felt something tighten in his chest, something old and buried. The auctioneer clapped his hands. "All right, let's start at $20. Who'll give me 20? "Silence. Come on now, he's young. You can train him up." A man in a brown duster raised 2 fingers. 15. 15, I got 15. Who'll go 20? Gideon's hands curled into fists. He told himself to walk away, to leave this place and not look back. He had his own land to work, his own ghosts to wrestle with. He didn't need to take on someone else's. But the boy whispered again, "I can sleep in my boots." And Gideon saw it, the tremor in the boy's shoulders, the way he didn't cry, didn't beg, just held on to that one sentence like it was the only thing keeping him alive. The man in the duster stepped forward. "I'll take him at 15. The auctioneer grinned. "Sold to." 30, Gideon said. Every head turned. Gideon stepped through the crowd, his boots kicking up dust, his expression unreadable. He didn't look at the other men, he looked at the boy. The boy's eyes lifted for the first time, wide, hollow, afraid. $30, Gideon repeated, his voice low and steady. "Cash." The auctioneer's grin widened. "Well now, 30 from the man in the back, anyone else?" The man in the duster scowled but said nothing. He turned and walked away. "Sold," the auctioneer said, slapping his thigh. "Pay up front, mister." Gideon pulled the bills from his coat pocket and handed them over without a word. The auctioneer counted them twice, then nodded toward the boy. "He's yours, good luck with him." Gideon walked to the post and crouched down. The boy flinched, pulling his knees tighter. "I'm going to untie you," Gideon said quietly. "That's all." The boy didn't answer. Gideon reached behind the post and worked the knot loose. The rope fell away. The boy's wrists were raw, streaked with dried blood. He didn't move. "Can you stand?" Gideon asked. The boy nodded, but his legs shook when he tried. Gideon offered a hand. The boy stared at it like it might bite him. "I'm not going to hurt you," Gideon said. The boy took the hand. His grip was weak, his palm cold despite the heat. Gideon pulled him to his feet, and the boy swayed, catching himself against the post. "Come on," Gideon said. "Let's get you out of here." They walked through the crowd in silence. Men stepped aside. A few muttered under their breath. One spat in the dirt as they passed. Gideon led the boy to his wagon, parked near the edge of the rail yard. He gestured to the back. Sit. The boy climbed up slowly, his movements stiff and careful. He sat on the edge of the wagon bed, his boots hanging over the side, and stared at the ground. Gideon untied his horse from the post and climbed into the driver's seat. He snapped the reins, and the wagon lurched forward. They rode in silence for a long time. The sun was high and merciless, dust hung in the air. The boy didn't speak, didn't look up. After a mile, Gideon glanced back. You got a name? The boy hesitated, then, barely audible, Sam. Sam, Gideon repeated. He nodded. All right, Sam, I'm Gideon. Sam said nothing. Gideon turned back to the road. The wagon wheels creaked. The wind whispered through the dry grass. You don't have to sleep in your boots anymore, Gideon said quietly. Not unless you want to. Sam's hands tightened around the edge of the wagon. His voice, when it came, was a broken whisper. I have to. Gideon didn't ask why, not yet. He just kept driving. The ride to Gideon's ranch took 2 hours. Sam didn't speak again. He sat in the back of the wagon with his knees pulled up, his arms wrapped around them, his eyes fixed on his boots. When they arrived, Gideon pulled the wagon to a stop near the barn. The ranch was small, just a cabin, a barn, a few corrals. The land stretched out flat and endless, dotted with scrub brush and mesquite. It wasn't much, but it was his. Come on, Gideon said, climbing down. Sam slid off the back of the wagon and stood there, swaying slightly, like he wasn't sure where to go. Gideon nodded toward the cabin. You hungry? Sam didn't answer, but his eyes flicked toward the door. I'll take that as a yes. Inside, the cabin was plain. A table, 2 chairs, a stove, a bed in the corner. Gideon pulled a tin of jerky from the shelf and set it on the table along with a canteen of water. Sit, eat. Sam sat. He took a piece of jerky and chewed slowly, mechanically, like he'd forgotten what food tasted like. He drank the water in small, careful sips. Gideon leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching. The boy looked worse in the light. His face was gaunt, his eyes ringed with shadow. The bruises on his arms were old, yellow-green, but it was the boots that still drew Gideon's attention. Why won't you take them off? Gideon asked. Sam stopped chewing, his jaw clenched. You don't have to tell me, Gideon said, but if you're staying here, you need to know something. I didn't buy you to own you. I bought you to get you out of there. You understand? Sam's eyes lifted just for a second, suspicious, scared. I'm not going to hurt you, Gideon continued, and I'm not going to sell you, but I need to know what I'm dealing with, so if there's something you need to tell me, now's the time. Sam looked down at his boots again. His voice was barely a whisper. If I take them off, I can't run. Gideon frowned. Run from what? From whoever comes next. The words hung in the air like smoke. Gideon pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. Who's coming, Sam? Sam shook his head. I don't know, but someone always does. Gideon studied the boy's face. He saw the exhaustion there, the kind that came from running, from never sleeping, from always waiting for the next bad thing. How long you been running? 3 years. Gideon's chest tightened. 3 years. Sam nodded. Since they came. Who came? Sam's hands started to shake. He set the jerky down and wrapped his arms around himself. The soldiers, they said my pa was a traitor, that he sold guns to the Confederates after the war. They burned our farm, took everything. Gideon went very still. My ma and my sister, Sam's voice cracked. They didn't make it out. Gideon felt something cold settle in his gut. Where was this? Outside San Angelo, near Dove Creek. The name hit Gideon like a fist. Dove Creek. He knew that place. He'd been there. Sam kept talking, his voice flat, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized. My pa tried to stop them. They shot him in front of me, told me to run, so I did. I ran. Gideon's throat went dry. What was your pa's name? Sam looked up, confused. Why? Just tell me. Elias Brennan. The air left Gideon's lungs. He remembered. It had been 8 years ago. Gideon had been riding with a Union patrol, newly discharged, broke, desperate for work. They'd been sent to investigate reports of weapons smuggling. The officer in charge, a man named Dalton, had been convinced that a farmer named Elias Brennan was running guns. Gideon had gone along. He'd watched as Dalton's men surrounded the farm. He'd watched as they dragged Elias Brennan out of his house. He'd watched as Dalton put a gun to the man's head and demanded a confession. Brennan had refused. Dalton had shot him anyway. Then they'd burned the house. Gideon had stood there. He'd done nothing. He'd told himself it wasn't his fight, that he was just following orders, that he didn't have a choice. He'd walked away. And now, sitting across from him, was the boy who'd run from that fire. Sam was still talking. I don't even know if my pa was guilty. I don't know if it mattered. They killed him anyway. Gideon's hands gripped the edge of the table. His voice came out rough. Sam, what do you remember about that day? Sam frowned. What do you mean? Do you remember the soldiers, their faces? Sam shook his head. I was hiding. My pa told me to stay in the cellar. I heard the shots. I heard the fire. When I came out, they were gone. Gideon closed his eyes. Why? Sam asked, his voice sharper now. Why are you asking? Gideon opened his eyes and looked at the boy. At the fear, at the exhaustion, at the boots he wouldn't take off because he believed he'd have to run again. Because, Gideon said quietly, I was there. Sam went very still. I was one of the soldiers, Gideon continued. I didn't pull the trigger, but I stood there, I watched, and I did nothing. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sam's face twisted, confusion, anger, betrayal. You, his voice cracked, you were there. Gideon nodded, I was. Sam stood up so fast his chair fell over. His hands were shaking. You helped kill my pa. I didn't stop it, Gideon said, and that's the same thing. Sam backed toward the door, his eyes wide, his breath coming fast. You brought me here. Why? To finish what you started. No, Gideon said, standing slowly. I brought you here because I owe you, because I should have done something that day, and I didn't, and I've been carrying that weight ever since. Sam stared at him, trembling. You think that makes it better? No, Gideon said, it doesn't. Sam's hand found the door handle. I should run. You could, Gideon said, but you'd still be running, and I think you're tired, Sam. I think you've been tired for a long time. Sam's grip on the handle tightened. His whole body shook. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Gideon said. I'm asking you to let me try to make it right. Sam didn't answer. He just stood there, his hand on the door, his boots still laced tight. Finally, he whispered, I don't know if I can. Then don't, Gideon said, but stay anyway, at least for tonight. Sam looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he let go of the handle. He didn't sit back down, but he didn't leave either. 3 days passed. Sam stayed in the barn. He didn't speak much. He helped with small tasks, feeding the horses, stacking hay, but he kept his distance. At night, Gideon could hear him moving around in the loft, restless, unable to sleep. The boots stayed on. On the 4th morning, Gideon woke to the sound of hoofbeats. He pulled on his pants and stepped outside. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. A group of riders approached from the east, 5 men, moving slow and deliberate. Gideon's hand went to the rifle leaning against the cabin wall. The riders stopped 20 feet from the porch. The man in front was tall, broad-shouldered, with a badge pinned to his chest. His face was weathered, his eyes cold. Gideon recognized him immediately. Sheriff Wade Dalton, the same man who'd killed Elias Brennan. Gideon Cole, Dalton said, his voice flat. Been a long time. Gideon didn't lower the rifle. Not long enough. Dalton smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Heard you bought yourself a boy at the rail yard auction, that true? What's it to you? That boy's wanted for theft, stole a horse from a ranch outside Fort Davis. Owner wants him back. Gideon's jaw tightened. He's 12 years old. Old enough to steal, Dalton said. He gestured to the barn. Hand him over and we'll be on our way. No. Dalton's smile faded. You interfering with the law, Cole. I'm interfering with you, Gideon said. There's a difference. One of the men behind Dalton shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his gun. Dalton raised a hand, stopping him. You know who that boy is? Dalton asked. I know, Gideon said. Dalton's eyes narrowed. Then you know his pa was a traitor, a gun runner. We did what needed to be done. You murdered an innocent man, Gideon said, and you burned his family alive. We followed orders, Dalton said, same as you. I didn't follow them, Gideon said. I just didn't stop them, but I'm stopping you now. Dalton leaned forward in his saddle. You think you can take all 5 of us? I think you're not going to find out. The barn door creaked open. Sam stepped out, his face pale, his hands trembling. He looked at Dalton, and his eyes went wide. That's him, Sam whispered. That's the man who killed my pa. Dalton's expression didn't change. Boy, you need to come with us. Sam shook his head. No. Wasn't a request. Sam took a step back. Gideon moved in front of him, the rifle raised. He's not going anywhere, Gideon said. Dalton sighed. Cole, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Good. Dalton stared at him for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He tossed it onto the ground. That's a warrant, signed by a judge, legal and proper. If you don't hand him over, I'll arrest you too. Gideon didn't move. Then I guess you'll have to try. Dalton's jaw clenched. He looked at the men behind him, then back at Gideon. You're willing to die for this boy? I'm willing to stand for him, Gideon said. Some things are worth standing for. Dalton's hand moved toward H. Is gun. And then another voice called out from the road. Sheriff. Everyone turned. An old man on a mule rode up slowly, his face lined with age, his hat tilted back. Behind him came 3 more riders, ranch hands by the look of them, hard men with weathered faces and rifles across their saddles. The old man stopped next to Dalton's horse. Heard you were riding out this way, Wade. Thought I'd come see what all the fuss was about. Dalton's face darkened. This doesn't concern you, Dutch. The old man, Dutch, glanced at Gideon, then at Sam. Boy looks scared. What he do? Stole a horse, Dalton said. Dutch raised an eyebrow. That's so, he looked at Sam. You steal a horse, son. Sam shook his head. No, sir. Dutch nodded slowly, then he looked at Dalton. You got proof? I got a warrant. That's not proof, Dutch said. That's paper. One of the ranch hands behind Dutch chuckled. Dalton's face flushed red. You calling me a liar? I'm saying I've known Gid Cole for 20 years, Dutch said, and I've known you for 10. If he says the boy didn't steal, I believe him. If you say he did, I'm inclined to ask questions. Dalton's hand twitched near his gun. You're making a mistake, old man. Dutch shrugged. Made plenty of those. One more won't hurt. The ranch hands behind him shifted, their rifles resting easy in their hands. Not aimed, not yet. But the message was clear. Dalton stared at Dutch for a long moment, then he looked at Gideon. This isn't over. Yeah, Gideon said, it is. Dalton yanked his horse's reins and turned. His men followed. They rode off slowly, dust rising behind them. Dutch waited until they were out of sight. Then he turned to Gideon and grinned. You always did have a talent for pissing off the wrong people. Gideon lowered the rifle. Thanks, Dutch. Don't thank me yet, Dutch said. Dalton's not the forgiving type. He'll be back. I know. Dutch glanced at Sam. that Elias Brennan's boy? Gideon nodded. Dutch was quiet for a moment, then he said, heard about what happened to Elias. Shame, he was a good man. Sam's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't let them fall. Dutch tipped his hat. You take care of him, Gid, and if Dalton comes back you send word, we'll come running. I will. Dutch and his men rode off. Gideon turned to Sam. The boy was shaking, his arms wrapped around himself. Come on, Gideon said gently, let's go inside. Sam didn't move, he's going to come back. I know. And then what? Gideon looked at him, then we deal with it together. Sam's voice cracked. Why are you doing this? Because, Gideon said, I should have done it 8 years ago. That night Gideon made stew. Sam sat at the table, silent, his hands folded in his lap. He ate slowly, like he was still afraid the food might disappear. When they finished, Gideon poured 2 cups of water and set one in front of Sam. He sat down across from him. You ever think about what you want to do, Gideon asked, when you're older? Sam shrugged, never thought I'd get older. Gideon's chest tightened, you will. Sam looked at him, how do you know? Because I'm not letting anyone take you. Sam's eyes searched Gideon's face, looking for the lie. He didn't find one. Why? Sam asked quietly, why do you care? Gideon leaned back in his chair. Because I know what it's like to carry guilt, to live with something you can't undo, and I know what it's like to be alone. Sam's voice was barely a whisper. Were you alone? For a long time, Gideon said. After the war, after everything, I didn't think I deserved anything else. Do you now? Gideon met his eyes. I don't know, but I know you do. Sam looked down at his boots. I don't know how to stop. Stop what? Running. Gideon was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and walked to the corner of the room. He pulled a wooden box from under the bed and brought it back to the table. He opened it and took out a small object wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it carefully. It was a pocket watch, old and scratched, the glass cracked. This was my father's, Gideon said. He gave it to me before he died, told me it was the only thing worth keeping time, because you can't get it back once it's gone. He set the watch on the table. I've been wasting mine for 8 years, trying to forget, trying to run from what I did or didn't do. Sam stared at the watch. But I can't run anymore, Gideon said, and neither can you, so maybe we stop together. Sam's hands were shaking. I don't know if I can. Then we'll figure it out, Gideon said, one day at a time. Sam's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared. I know. I'm scared all the time. Gideon reached across the table and put his hand over Sam's. Me too. Sam looked up, surprised. You think I'm not scared? Gideon said. I'm terrified, but I'm done letting fear make my decisions. Sam's tears spilled over. He wiped them away quickly, ashamed. It's all right to cry, Gideon said gently. My pa said CR. Ying was for the weak. Your pa was wrong. Sam sobbed then, hard and broken, his whole body shaking. Gideon moved around the table and knelt beside him. He put a hand on the boy's shoulder. You're not weak, Gideon said. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Sam shook his head, but he didn't pull away. After a while, the sobs quieted. Sam wiped his face with his sleeve. His voice was hoarse. What if they come back? Then we'll deal with it. What if I can't fight? You don't have to, Gideon said. That's what I'm here for. Sam looked at him, his eyes red and swollen. You'd really do that for me? I already did, Gideon said, and I'll keep doing it for as long as you need. Sam was quiet for a long time. Then he said, can I ask you something? Anything. Why didn't you stop them that day when they killed my pa? Gideon's throat tightened. Because I was afraid of what would happen if I stood up, afraid of losing my place, my pay, my life. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility, that I couldn't change anything. But you could have. Yeah, Gideon said, I could have. Sam looked at his boots again. I don't know if I can forgive you. I'm not asking you to. Then what are you asking? Just to stay, Gideon said, just to let me try. Sam's fingers traced the edge of the table. Okay. Okay. I'll stay, Sam said, for now. Gideon felt something loosen in his chest. That's enough. Sam looked at him. Can I ask you something else? Sure. If I take off my boots, will you stay awake in case I need to run? Gideon's heart broke. I'll stay awake. Sam hesitated. Then slowly he bent down and unlaced his boots. He pulled them off, one at a time, and set them carefully beside his chair. His feet were blistered and raw. The socks were torn. Gideon stood and went to the shelf. He pulled down a tin of salve and a clean cloth. He knelt in front of Sam and gently cleaned the blisters, then wrapped them. There, Gideon said, better. Sam nodded, his voice barely audible. Thank you. Gideon stood and ruffled the boy's hair. Come on, let's get some sleep. Sam stood, his bare feet on the wooden floor. He looked at his boots, then at Gideon. Sleep without fear, Gideon said quietly. I've got you. Sam's lip trembled, but he nodded. That night Sam slept in the cabin. Gideon sat in a chair by the door, the rifle across his lap, and watched the darkness outside. He didn't sleep. But for the first time in 8 years, he felt like he was doing something right. So take a deep breath, pour yourself some tea, and think about this. If you were Gideon, would you have opened that door? Would you have stood when it mattered most? Sometimes the hardest thing we do isn't fighting. It's standing still and saying, not on my watch. If you're still with me, I need to know, what time is it where you are right now? And tell me, do you think Sam will ever truly forgive him? Sheriff Dalton came back 6 days later. This time he didn't bring 5 men, he brought 15. Gideon saw them from the porch, a line of riders moving slow across the plain, dust rising behind them like smoke. He set down his coffee and picked up the rifle. Sam stepped out of the barn, his face pale. It's him. I know, Gideon said. Get inside. No. Gideon turned. Sam. I'm not hiding anymore, Sam said. His voice shook, but his jaw was set. If he's coming for me, I'm not going to hide. Gideon studied the boy's face. Then he nodded. All right, but you stay behind me. Sam nodded. The riders stopped 50 feet from the cabin. Dalton sat at the front, his face hard, his hand resting on his gun. Last chance, Cole, Dalton called. Hand over the boy or I'll take him by force. Gideon raised the rifle. Then you'll have to go through me. Dalton's eyes narrowed. So be it. He raised his hand, ready to signal his men. And then another sound rose from the east. Hoofbeats, dozens of them. Dalton turned, his face darkening. A crowd of riders appeared over the ridge, ranch hands, farmers, townspeople, 20, 30, maybe more. They spread out in a line facing Dalton's men. Dutch rode at the front. Behind him was the blacksmith from town, the general store owner, the stable master. Men Gideon had worked with, traded with, lived beside for years. Dutch stopped his mule next to Dalton's horse. Morning, Wade. Dalton's jaw clenched. This doesn't concern you. Sure it does, Dutch said. Gid's our neighbor. That boy's under his protection. That makes it our business. Another man spoke up, a farmer named Holt. I knew Elias Brennan. He was a good man. You killed him for no reason, Wade. We all know it. Dalton's face flushed red. He was a traitor. He was a scapegoat, Dutch said. You needed someone to blame, so you picked him. And now you're trying to finish the job by taking his son. Dalton's hand moved toward his gun. You're interfering with the law. No, Dutch said, we're enforcing it, real law. The kind that says you don't murder innocent people and steal their children. One of Dalton's men shifted nervously. Sheriff, there's too many of them. Dalton glared at him. Shut up. But the man was right. Dalton's 15 men were outnumbered 2-1, and the townspeople weren't backing down. Dutch leaned forward in his saddle. "Wade, I've known you a long time. You've done some good things, some bad things, but this is where you decide what kind of man you really are." Dalton stared at him, his jaw working. "You can ride away," Dutch continued, "or you can start a fight you won't win, your choice." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Dalton yanked his reins and turned his horse. "This isn't over," he said, his voice tight. "Yeah," Dutch said, "it is." Dalton rode off, his men following. They disappeared over the ridge, the dust settling behind them. The townspeople stayed until they were gone. Then Dutch turned to Gideon and grinned. "Told you we'd come running." Gideon lowered the rifle. "I owe you." "You don't owe me anything," Dutch said. "You did the right thing. We're just making sure it sticks." He looked at Sam. "You all right, son?" Sam nodded, his eyes wide. Dutch tipped his hat. "You take care of Gid, you hear? He needs someone to keep him out of trouble." Sam managed a small smile. "Yes, sir." Dutch and the others rode off, one by one, until it was just Gideon and Sam standing in the yard. Sam looked up at Gideon. "They came for me." "They came for what was right," Gideon said. Sam was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Thank you." Gideon put a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do," Sam said. "You stood for me, even when you didn't have to." Gideon's throat tightened. "I should have stood for your pa, I can't undo that, but I can stand for you now, and I will, for as long as you need." Sam's eyes filled with tears. I think I can forgive you, someday." Gideon's chest ached. "That's more than I deserve." "No," Sam said, "it's exactly what you deserve." Days turned into weeks. Sam stayed. He helped with the horses, mended fences, learned to cook. His hands grew steady. His sleep came easier. One evening, Gideon found him sitting on the porch, his boots beside him, unlaced, set carefully on the wood. "You all right?" Gideon asked. Sam nodded. "I was just thinking." "About what?" "About how long it took me to take them off." Gideon sat down beside him, and Sam looked at the horizon, where the sun was sinking low, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I think I'm ready to stop running." Gideon smiled. "Good." Sam looked at him. "What about you? You ready to stop running?" Gideon was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Yeah, I think I am." They sat there in silence, watching the sun set. The wind moved through the grass, soft and warm. The world felt still, peaceful. Sam leaned back against the post and closed his eyes. "I think I can sleep without my boots tonight." "Good," Gideon said. "Sleep without fear." Sam smiled. "I will." Years later, Sam would still remember that evening. The way the light looked, the way the air felt, the way Gideon sat beside him, quiet and steady, like a wall against the storm. He would remember the boots, cracked and worn, sitting on the porch, finally at rest. And he would remember the words Gideon spoke that night, words that would carry him through every hard thing that came after. "You don't have to run anymore, I've got you." The sun dipped lower, dust rose in the distance, and for the first time in 3 years, Sam Brennan slept without fear.